The War Council disbanded, but the uneasy tension in the air remained. Vaxar lingered in the chamber, staring at the massive holographic display that projected the coordinates of the impending battle. His fellow commanders had dismissed his warnings, focusing instead on the grandeur of their overwhelming numbers. The vast fleet of over 200 ships, spanning light years of space, would crush humanity's single vessel with ease. They believed this to be inevitable, the weight of their power unquestioned. Zoric's voice still echoed in Vaxar's mind. We have the numbers. We have the power. It was true, in a way. The aliens had conquered countless worlds, decimated civilizations far greater than humanity's fledgling empire. Yet something gnawed at him, a feeling he couldn't shake. The human race had proven difficult to predict. No matter how many battles the aliens had fought, every encounter with humans seemed to offer new surprises. The way they fought, the way they survived. It was unlike anything Vaxar had seen. Vaxar's sharp eyes scanned the fleet's roster. The U.S. Resolute was listed at the top, humanity's only ship to face the might of the coalition. A single old warship, barely more than a relic of the past. It had served humanity for decades, but even the humans who piloted it knew that it was no match for the alien armada. It was a token of defiance, not a legitimate weapon of war. But there was something in the report that had caught his attention: the crew. Captain Abigail Harlow was known for her unyielding will. She had led humanity's last stand against a minor alien invasion years ago, using guerrilla tactics to defeat an overwhelming enemy force. Under her command, the Resolute had turned what should have been certain defeat into a brutal victory. It was this quality that worried Vaxar. Humanity's ability to defy the odds was not something easily dismissed. Outside the council chamber, the vast expanse of the alien fleet continued to organize itself, ships of every shape and size aligning in a massive formation. The fleet was a marvel of engineering, a display of military might that seemed unstoppable. Zoric's confidence was reflected in every corner of the armada. Their vessels were technologically superior, their weapons unmatched. But still, Vaxar felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. He stepped out onto the observation deck of the command station, watching the ships glide silently into their positions. The coldness of space stretched infinitely before him, and for the first time, Vaxar allowed himself to consider the possibility that their calculations might be flawed. Humanity's resolve could not be measured by the usual metrics of war: ships, firepower, and strength. In the distance, a ripple of light appeared as the first of the human ships entered the coordinates of the battle. The alien commanders had expected a fleet. Instead, they saw a single blip appear on the radar: U.S. Resolute, humanity's only hope. It was smaller than any alien vessel, its hull worn and scarred from countless battles. But even at that distance, Vaxar could see the one thing that was undeniable. The ship wasn't retreating. It wasn't backing down. Humanity's lone vessel was charging forward, undeterred by the massive enemy fleet before it. It was as though the ship was daring the aliens to strike first, to prove that they could be stopped. A slight shiver ran down Vaxar's spine. He had been wrong to dismiss the humans. Perhaps in the end, it wasn't the strength of the fleet that mattered. It was the strength of the human spirit. And as the Resolute drew closer, he realized with sudden clarity, this wasn't going to be as simple as they thought. The final pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. The war would be fought not just with weapons, but with something far more dangerous: humanity's unyielding determination to survive. As the U.S. Resolute drifted into view, the alien commanders watched in stunned silence. It was the only ship to emerge from hyperspace, the lone blip on the edge of their radar. It was as if the universe itself was mocking them, presenting them with one solitary human ship against the might of their combined fleet. The alien fleets, numbering over 200 ships, stretched across the star system like a wall of unstoppable destruction. There was no way the Resolute would survive. Yet, here it was, humanity's final defiance, standing tall in the face of annihilation. The smugness in the command center was palpable as the alien commanders exchanged bemused glances. "This is their force." Zorak sneered, his massive, scaled face twisted into a smile of contempt. "This is no army. It's an insult." General Tlar, ever the strategist, was less certain. The Mirath were known for their telepathic prowess, and as Tlar focused on the lone human ship, a sense of unease began to creep through their mind. "Something's wrong," Tlar muttered, their voice a smooth hum, nearly drowned out by the laughter around them. "I don't like this. It's too simple." Zorak waved away the concern. "It's a trick, a pathetic last-ditch effort. We'll crush them quickly." At the helm of the Resolute, Captain Abigail Harlow stood tall, her face stoic, but her mind razor-sharp. She had known the moment would come, this desperate, solitary charge into the heart of the alien fleet. The Resolute was no longer just a warship. It had become a symbol, not of weakness, but of humanity's relentless drive to survive. She had seen countless battles, watched as her comrades fell, but this time, it wasn't just about survival. It was about showing the galaxy that humanity would never bow to invaders. They would fight. They would resist. And they would do it with everything they had. "Deploy all interceptors," Harlow ordered, her voice calm but fierce. "Let them know we're not here to roll over." Her crew, a tightly knit group of veterans and recruits, moved swiftly and with precision. The Resolute wasn't designed for a fight like this. It wasn't built to take on an entire armada. But it had one thing that none of the alien ships possessed: a crew who believed in its mission. As the ship's weapons powered up, the crew prepared for their first strike. Vaxar, still watching the display, could hardly believe his eyes. The Resolute was moving forward, not retreating, as he had expected. As the ship slowly advanced, Captain Harlow's voice crackled through the communication channels, a calm command that sent chills through Vaxar's spine. "Resolute to the alien fleet. You came to destroy us. We're here to show you what happens when you underestimate humanity." For a brief moment, there was silence on the alien side of the communication. The audacity, the boldness of that statement hung in the air like a challenge. And then, the ship's weapons fired. The Resolute unleashed its first salvo, a series of high-powered plasma blasts aimed directly at an alien destroyer. The alien ship's shields flared with energy as they absorbed the initial shots, but the Resolute's follow-up barrage quickly compromised the outer layer of the shields. Before the alien ship could recover, a devastating missile fired from the Resolute's launch bay slammed into its exposed flank, sending the destroyer spiraling into the void. The enemy crew scrambled to regain control, but it was too late. The ship broke apart, scattering debris across the system. On the alien command ship, Zorak's face turned a shade of red as he leaned forward in disbelief. "How is this possible?" he growled. "That ship is nothing more than scrap." Slar was silent, still trying to process what had just happened. The Resolute wasn't supposed to do this. It wasn't supposed to damage anything, let alone destroy an entire destroyer. Yet here it was, executing a precision strike with terrifying efficiency. The crew of the Resolute had already proven that they weren't going to die quietly. Captain Harlow watched the destruction unfold on her screen, her face set with determination. She didn't have the luxury of overconfidence like the aliens. She knew they could turn the tide with a single mistake, but that wouldn't happen. Not on her watch. "Keep them off balance," Harlow ordered. "We strike hard, fast, and disappear into the shadows." As the Resolute darted away, taking advantage of every trick in the book to avoid retaliation, the aliens were left reeling. The human ship had turned the fight into a deadly game of cat and mouse, one the aliens had never expected to play. Vaxar's unease deepened. The Resolute was not just a ship. It was something more. On board the U.S. Resolute, Captain Abigail Harlow stood before her crew, her expression unwavering despite the chaos unfolding around them. The first strike had been a success, but it was only the beginning. Her crew had just disabled an alien destroyer, but they still faced an armada far greater than their own. The battle was far from over, and Harlow knew that one successful strike wouldn't win the war. They had to keep fighting. They had to make every shot count. "Listen up, people," Harlow said, her voice carrying through the tense silence of the command deck. Her officers stood at attention, their faces a mixture of determination and anxiety. That first hit was just the beginning. We've got one chance to make them understand we're not going down without a fight. Every decision from here on out will count. There's no room for mistakes. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Zhang, the ship's tactical officer, glanced up from his console, his eyes narrowed in concentration. "Captain, we've taken some damage to the port side. Shields are down to 30%. We need to think fast, or we'll be sitting ducks." Harlow nodded, her gaze never wavering. She could feel the weight of every choice she made bearing down on her, but she wouldn't falter. Not now. Not when humanity's future was hanging in the balance. "Divert power to the starboard side and reinforce the shields. We'll use the asteroid field to our advantage," Harlow ordered. "We've got to keep them guessing. The moment they think they have us, we'll hit them again. Don't give them a second to breathe." As the crew scrambled into action, Harlow turned to her first officer, Commander Elena Rodriguez. The two women exchanged a look, one of understanding, one of mutual respect. They had fought side by side for years, but this was different. This wasn't just about fighting an alien threat. This was about showing the galaxy that humanity could endure, that they could resist anything thrown their way. "We've only got one ship," Harlow said quietly, "but that's all we need. We're going to make them regret underestimating us." Rodriguez gave a small nod, her eyes hardening. "We'll make sure of it, Captain." The Resolute surged forward, the engines groaning under the strain as they pushed the ship into the asteroid field. The vast rocks and debris provided a natural shield, and the crew used them to their advantage, weaving in and out of the dense field, staying hidden from the alien fleet's radar. As the alien forces closed in, expecting the Resolute to break and flee, they were instead met with another surprise. The human ship popped in and out of sight like a ghost, only to strike when they least expected it. The Resolute's smaller size and surprising agility allowed it to slip between the larger enemy ships, darting in to fire devastating shots at vulnerable targets. Another alien vessel, this time a cruiser, took a direct hit to its engine core and exploded in a fiery ball of debris. The shockwaves sent ripples through the alien fleet, throwing off their calculations and forcing them to reassess. "Nice shot, Lieutenant," Harlow called over her shoulder to Lieutenant Zhang, who couldn't help but crack a grin despite the tension. "Thanks, Captain," he replied, his eyes gleaming with adrenaline. They didn't see that one coming. The alien commanders were in disarray. The once predominant sense of superiority was slowly being eroded as one ship, one Resolute, danced around them, delivering blows they had never anticipated. Each strike was like a small victory, not just for the crew, but for the human race itself. Every shot fired, every successful evasion, chipped away at the alien arrogance, and the doubts Vaxer had earlier sensed began to bubble to the surface. "Report," Jorik roared, his patience thinning. "Why aren't we wiping them out already?" Flar, still watching the chaotic battlefield through their telepathic senses, finally spoke. "The humans, they're not like anything we've faced before. Their tactics, their unpredictability. It's throwing off our entire strategy. It's like they're anticipating our every move." Zorik's eyes burned with frustration. "Then destroy them already," he barked, but the uncertainty in his voice was undeniable. They were no longer the invincible force they had once thought themselves to be. Back on the Resolute, Captain Harlow wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing her retreat. The ship's engines hummed as they cut through the asteroid field, darting between massive rocks, firing precise bursts of energy at anything that moved. The crew was exhausted, but they didn't stop. They had no choice. The Resolute wasn't just a ship. It was a statement, a beacon of resistance in a galaxy that had already written humanity off. And they would not go down without giving everything they had. "Keep pushing," Harlow ordered, her voice as fierce as ever. "Let them feel the cost of underestimating us. We fight until the last breath." The Resolute slipped into another gap between asteroids, disappearing from the alien fleet's radar once again. It was just one ship, but for the first time in the battle, the aliens knew humanity wasn't going to make this easy. The U.S. Resolute darted through the asteroid field like a phantom, weaving between massive jagged rocks while avoiding the laser fire that the alien fleet was relentlessly sending after them. Captain Abigail Harlow's hands gripped the armrests of her chair as she focused on the tactical displays in front of her. The crew was pushing the ship to its limits, but the alien fleet was vast, and they had made it clear that they weren't going to retreat easily. "We've just taken out 2 more destroyers, Captain," Lieutenant Commander John reported, his voice crackling through the communication system. "But they're starting to adjust their strategy. They're coordinating their fire more effectively now. We won't be able to keep dodging forever." Harlow's jaw tightened. She had known this would happen. Eventually, the alien forces would adapt to their hit-and-run tactics, and that was when they would truly need to test their mettle. She counted on that, even as the odds stacked higher against them. "We need to go on the offensive," Harlow said, her tone sharp and deliberate. "Make a direct assault on their command ship. If we take it out, we'll disrupt their coordination. It might give us the advantage we need." The bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances, but no one voiced their doubt. The plan was risky, perhaps even reckless, but they all understood the stakes. A direct assault on the heart of the alien fleet would either cripple their forces or get them destroyed. It was all or nothing. Lieutenant Zhang set a course for the alien command ship. "We're going in." The ship's engines rumbled in response as the crew rushed to prepare. The Resolute was no longer just a ship. It was a weapon, one that was meant to strike at the heart of the alien coalition. With the asteroid field now behind them, they were in open space, exposed to the full might of the fleet. Harlow's mind raced, her focus unbreakable as the distant alien command ship loomed large ahead. It was the center of the alien forces, and taking it out would send a clear message that humanity was not to be underestimated. On the command ship of the alien fleet, Grand Marshal Jorek was fuming. "How many more of our ships must fall before we realize that these humans are more dangerous than we thought?" He spat, his eyes blazing with rage. He stood before a tactical display showing the Resolute's movement as it drew closer. The human ship had already taken out several of their vessels, each strike landing with the precision of an experienced hunter. Jorek couldn't deny that they had underestimated their enemy. Slar, still trying to probe the human mind, felt an eerie resistance. It was as if the humans, rather than retreating, were stepping into the fire with full awareness. "They're not following the patterns we expect. They're evolving," Slar said softly, the words laden with disbelief. "It's like they're adapting to us." Jorek sneered. "Enough talk. The time for hesitation is over. Bring the full force of the fleet down upon them. We will obliterate them and show them that they are nothing more than insects in our path." The order was given, and the alien fleet moved in, their ships forming a near-impenetrable wall of destruction. But for every alien ship that closed in, the Resolute seemed to slip through, always staying one step ahead. Back on the Resolute, Harlow stood before her crew, her eyes focused on the tactical display. The command ship was within reach now, and she could feel the tension rising as they prepared for the final push. The moment of truth had arrived. They would either make their mark in history or be erased from it. "Prepare for impact," Harlow said, her voice calm despite the chaos swirling outside. "We take this fight to them. Full speed ahead." The Resolute surged forward, its engines roaring as it cut through space toward the alien command ship. The enemy fleet opened fire, but the Resolute's agility allowed it to dodge their attacks, moving with unpredictable swiftness. "All batteries, fire at will," Harlow commanded. Her voice was steady, but every part of her mind was attuned to the battle. The Resolute unleashed its most powerful weapons in a concentrated assault, the energy blasts tearing through the void and slamming into the alien command ship shields. The enemy's defenses began to flicker, and Harlow saw the first signs of weakness. Their shields couldn't hold much longer. The aliens weren't prepared for this level of resistance. The human ship had caught them off guard yet again. "This is it, people," Harlow said, her voice filled with intensity. "We break through, or we die trying." The Resolute pushed forward with renewed determination. The aliens might have the numbers, but they didn't have the willpower, the unpredictability, or the sheer audacity of humanity. Harlow knew this was their chance. If they didn't succeed now, there would be no second chance. As the distance between the Resolute and the alien command ship closed, the tension aboard the human vessel reached a boiling point. It was time for humanity to prove that they would not be erased. They would fight, and they would make the alien fleet remember their name. The battle raged on, and the tide was beginning to shift. The U.S. Resolute plunged forward, engines at full throttle, as the alien command ship loomed closer. Captain Harlow's knuckles were white as she gripped the armrests of her seat, eyes locked on the tactical display. The ship had taken more damage than she'd like to admit. Shields flickering, weapons systems trained, and the hull groaning under the relentless fire. But it wasn't enough to stop them. Not yet. Not when they were this close to victory. "Shields are holding at 20%, Lieutenant Jung reported. "We've got to make it through another round of fire before we can breach their defenses." "Just a little longer," Harlow replied, her voice steady but strained. "We've come too far to back down now." The alien command ship was a massive, monolithic structure, bristling with weapons and energy shields that would make most other ships crumble in seconds. But the Resolute wasn't facing it like any normal fleet would. They weren't here for a drawn-out battle. They were here for a surgical strike, to make a point. The aliens might have the numbers and the firepower, but humanity had something more important: determination. The Resolute shot past another wave of alien destroyers, narrowly dodging their blaster fire. The crew had become a well-oiled machine, anticipating each movement, adjusting the ship's trajectory with precision. Every second was vital now. "Targeting the command ship's central core," Jung said, adjusting his console. "One direct hit should disable their command systems. After that, their coordination will fall apart." Harlow nodded. "Make it count." The Resolute's weapons powered up as it closed in on the alien ship. The enemy fleet, now aware of the human ship's intent, began to fire in earnest. Hundreds of beams of energy lanced out, filling the space with a dazzling array of light. But the Resolute was nimble. Every time a shot came too close, the ship would roll or shift, using its speed to stay one step ahead of the incoming onslaught. "Brace for impact," Harlow called as the Resolute jolted from the force of a near miss. The ship was beginning to show signs of stress. Compartment doors sealing off sections to prevent fires, red lights flashing in the corridors, and a constant low hum of alarms warning of structural damage. But there was no time to fix anything. The final blow was just within reach. 5 seconds to target lock, Jean called out. "If we don't hit them now, we'll never get another chance." Harlow's eyes never left the view ahead. "Do it." With a sharp crackle, the ship's main guns fired, the massive energy blasts racing toward the alien command ship. The shots landed with pinpoint accuracy, punching through the alien vessel's shields. Sparks erupted as the shields flickered and failed, and then the blasts tore through the hull. Striking the core of the command ship, the alien ship trembled under the force, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. But then, with a deafening explosion, the core of the alien command ship ruptured. A shockwave sent ripples of destruction across the surrounding fleet, causing ships to lose cohesion, firing wildly at nothing as their systems collapsed. On the Resolute, the crew erupted into cheers. They had done it. The alien fleet had lost their central command, and with it, their coordination was shattered. Harlow allowed herself a brief moment of relief, but it was short-lived. The Resolute was not out of danger yet. The remaining alien ships, though disorganized, still far outnumbered them. And now, with their command ship in ruins, the fleet was going into a desperate panic, firing indiscriminately in all directions. Harlow's ship was still very much in the thick of it. "Captain, the alien fleet is scattering," Zhang said, his voice filled with both relief and caution. "They're still firing, but their attacks are uncoordinated. We've broken their command." "Good," Harlow said. "Now we finish what we started." She could see it now, the first cracks in the alien force. The initial shock of the Resolute's assault had turned into a cascade of confusion and disorder among the aliens. But Harlow knew that this wasn't over. The enemy might have lost their nerve, but there were still far too many ships to consider the battle won. The Resolute was battered, but they were still standing, still fighting. "Plot a course to engage the nearest destroyer. We take out as many as we can before they regroup." A steady silence filled the command deck as the crew followed their orders with determination. The Resolute turned toward its next target, a new fury rising within the crew. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for every human soul across the galaxy. "We're not done yet," Harlow muttered to herself as she watched the tactical display. "We've only just begun to make them regret this." The battle for humanity's future was far from over, but the aliens were starting to understand the true cost of underestimating humanity. The tide had turned, and the Resolute was leading the charge. The alien fleet was in disarray. Their command ship had been destroyed in a spectacular display of firepower, sending shockwaves through their ranks. But despite the chaos, they weren't retreating. They weren't running. The remaining ships, although scattered and uncoordinated, were still formidable. Harlow knew that victory was still far from certain. "Captain, more ships are coming out of hyperspace," Lieutenant Zhang reported, his eyes glued to the scanners. "They're trying to regroup, form a new defensive line." Harlow's gaze hardened. They won't have the time. The Resolute was already moving toward the nearest alien destroyer, now a blazing streak of determination. The ship was still operational, but it was starting to show signs of wear. The shields were holding at only 15%, and there was a constant hum of alarms echoing through the ship. But the crew was steadfast. They had survived this far, and they weren't about to stop now. "Prepare for another strike," Harlow ordered, her voice calm despite the urgency. "We hit them fast. We hit them hard." The crew's coordination was almost instinctual now. Lieutenant Commander Zhang's fingers flew over his console, locking onto the destroyer that had positioned itself to cut off the Resolute's path. Targeting systems locked. "We're ready, Captain." "Fire," Harlow commanded. The Resolute unleashed another volley, plasma blasts streaking toward the alien ship. The destroyer's shields flared as they absorbed the impact, but they were weakening. With every blast, the Resolute was wearing them down. The alien ship retaliated with its own barrage, but the Resolute's agility allowed it to dodge most of the shots. The ship was wounded, yes, but it was still a deadly force. "Direct hit to their engines," Zhang announced. "They're losing power." The alien destroyer began to list, its engines sputtering as the Resolute closed in for the kill. Another barrage of missiles hit their target, and this time, the alien ship couldn't withstand the onslaught. The destroyer exploded in a burst of light and debris, its pieces scattering across the battlefield. The crew on the Resolute didn't cheer. There was no time for celebration. They were in the middle of a war that was far from over. But the fact that they had taken out yet another enemy vessel, despite their odds, gave them a renewed sense of purpose. "Target the next ship. Don't give them a chance to regroup," Harlow ordered, her eyes scanning the battlefield. The alien fleet was still formidable, but now there was a flicker of doubt in their movements. They were no longer acting with the same overwhelming confidence they had when the battle first started. The Resolute surged toward its next target, a larger alien cruiser that had joined the fray. It had managed to stay on the periphery of the fighting, waiting for an opening to strike. Now it was trying to close in on the Resolute, but Harlow wasn't about to give it that chance. "We need to keep the pressure on them," she said, her voice resolute. "If we give them a moment to breathe, we'll lose the momentum." The crew worked in unison, their movements sharp and precise. They fired, dodged, and maneuvered in ways that seemed almost unnatural for a ship of the Resolute's size. The alien cruiser took its first hit, shields flaring, but they couldn't hold. A second shot cracked through the cruiser's shields, and the Resolute unleashed a volley of missiles aimed at the cruiser's engines. The first missile hit with a thud, followed by two more. The cruiser's shields buckled under the strain, and the third missile broke through, slamming into the heart of the engine room. The explosion that followed was devastating. The cruiser's bulk was torn apart in a fiery ball, sending debris spinning in all directions. "Another one down," Lieutenant Jung said, his voice tinged with satisfaction. Harlow allowed herself a brief smile. Every ship they took down brought them one step closer to victory. But the battle was far from won. Even as the alien fleet began to falter, the remaining ships weren't backing down. The fleet had already lost its command ship, but the aliens were still fighting tooth and nail, determined to finish what they started. "Captain, we have incoming reinforcements," Zhang said urgently. "More ships, this time larger vessels. They're coming from the outer rim." The numbers were starting to grow again. The fight that had once seemed winnable now felt more like a final stand, but Harlow wasn't about to give in to the pressure. If this was their last chance to prove humanity's will, they would take it. "Set a course to intercept the reinforcements," Harlow ordered. "We show them we're not done yet. We're going to fight to the last breath." The Resolute was battered, its crew exhausted, but their spirit was unbroken. The aliens had learned a harsh lesson today. Humanity would never surrender, no matter the odds. The fight was far from over, but the aliens could no longer claim the upper hand. They had underestimated humanity, and now they would pay the price. The Resolute surged toward the incoming reinforcements, ready to strike again. The alien fleet was closing in, reinforcements arriving in waves from the outer rim. But despite the odds, the Resolute was not retreating. Captain Harlow stood at the front of the bridge, her eyes locked on the tactical display. The crew, though exhausted, was brimming with a fierce determination. They had already torn through a significant portion of the alien fleet, but now they faced a new wave of attackers, larger and more heavily armed than before. "Captain, the reinforcements are almost upon us," Lieutenant Zhang reported, his voice tight with tension. "We can't outrun them this time. We'll have to stand and fight." Harlow's mind raced, calculating their options. They couldn't afford another drawn-out battle. The Resolute was battered, its hull damaged, shields nearly depleted, and many of its systems on the verge of failure. Yet, retreat was not an option. There was only one chance left to tip the scales in their favor. "We won't outrun them, but we don't need to," Harlow said, her voice calm but filled with resolve. "We'll take them head-on. Prepare the final offensive." The crew exchanged glances, but there was no hesitation in their eyes. They had come this far, and they weren't going to stop now. The time for evasive tactics was over. The Resolute would take the fight to the heart of the alien reinforcements. "Lieutenant, lock onto the largest vessel in the reinforcements," Harlow ordered. "The one with the most firepower. We go for their flagship. Take out their command, and the rest will scatter." Zhang's fingers flew over his console as he zoomed in on the alien ships closing in. "Target locked. I'm bringing us in line to intercept." The Resolute surged forward, engines flaring as it cut through the darkness of space, heading straight for the enemy flagship. Alien ships tried to target them, firing blaster beams and energy pulses, but the Resolute moved with a precision that had become almost second nature. Each move was calculated. Every shot was deliberate. The alien fleet, despite its numbers, was beginning to falter. The loss of their command ship had already sent shockwaves through their ranks, and now, with their most powerful vessel charging directly at them, Panic began to spread. The human ship was small, agile, and unpredictable, and it was making the aliens question whether they were facing a military force or something far more dangerous, something that wouldn't back down. "Brace for impact," Zhang shouted as the Resolute dodged a volley of incoming fire, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. "Evasive maneuvers," Harlow commanded. The Resolute swerved, twisting around to brace from a destroyed alien ship as it made its way toward the flagship. But the alien ship's weapons were already charging up for another blast. Harlow's heart raced, but her mind stayed focused. She knew what needed to be done. They had one shot at this. "Now fire," she shouted. The Resolute fired its main weapons with everything it had left. The energy blast slammed into the flagship's shields, flaring brilliantly before the shields began to falter. The Resolute pressed on, drawing closer, dodging more incoming fire with every twist and turn. A loud thrum echoed through the ship as the Resolute unleashed its final wave of missiles. The ship's systems were barely holding together, but they were pushing every remaining ounce of power into this one final assault. The missiles hit their mark, piercing the alien flagship's failing shields and reaching the heart of its weapon systems. The explosion was massive, a brilliant flash of light that consumed the flagship. The shockwave radiated through the surrounding alien ships, sending several of them spinning out of control. On the bridge of the Resolute, the crew held their breath, watching as the alien flagship was reduced to debris. For a moment, it seemed like the entire battlefield stood still. And then, the aliens began to retreat. Harlow's eyes widened as the realization hit. The flagship had been the keystone of the alien fleet, and with its destruction, the remaining ships were in disarray. They had no leader, no command, and they were losing their resolve. The Resolute had done the impossible. They had cracked the heart of the alien invasion. "It's working, Captain," Lieutenant Zhang said, his voice filled with awe. "They're retreating. The remaining ships are pulling back." Harlow took a deep breath, letting the weight of the moment settle in. They had taken down the flagship, and with it the alien forces were falling apart. But the victory was bittersweet. The battle was won, but there was no telling how many more battles humanity would have to fight in the future. "Prepare to pursue the fleeing ships," Harlow said, her voice steady. "We finished this. No survivors." The crew nodded, their eyes filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The Resolute was battered and bruised, but it was still standing. Humanity had shown that it would never give up, and the alien invaders had learned that lesson the hard way. As the Resolute charged forward to finish the job, the stars ahead felt just a little bit brighter. Humanity had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with. The Resolute raced after the retreating alien ships, its engines screaming as the crew pushed the ship to its limits. The bridge was silent except for the hum of the ship's systems, the quiet tension of a crew that knew they had won, but at great cost. Their battered ship was a testament to the brutal battle that had unfolded across the stars, but the fight wasn't over. The remaining alien ships, though disorganized, still had teeth, and they weren't just going to surrender. "Captain, we've successfully disabled several of their ships," Lieutenant Zhang reported, his voice crackling with static. "But a few of them are attempting to make the jump to hyperspace." "Stop them," Harlow replied, her voice sharp. The destruction of the flagship had shattered the aliens' will to fight, but now, with their remaining forces attempting to flee, the Resolute had to make sure they didn't live to fight another day. She watched as the tactical display showed the alien ships frantically trying to escape. Their desperation was palpable. The loss of their command ship and the subsequent destruction of their fleet had rattled them, but they still held some power. It was time to finish this. No one had come this far only to let the enemy slip away. "Fire at their engines," Harlow ordered. The Resolute locked on to the nearest ship trying to escape and fired. The blast hit its engines with a direct strike, sending the alien ship careening into a nearby asteroid. The explosion that followed was almost silent, the vacuum of space absorbing the sound, but the visual impact was devastating. Confirmed kill, Jung said, looking at his screen. One more down. Another alien ship tried to make a jump, but the Resolute wasn't going to give it the chance. Their weapons fired again, striking the fleeing ship's hyperspace drive. There was no time for the enemy to react. The ship exploded in a burst of light, its remains scattering across the black expanse. Harlow's fingers tightened around the console, her mind still sharp despite the exhaustion she felt. "We've got a few more stragglers," she said. "Keep the pressure on. No one escapes today." On the bridge, the crew nodded in agreement. They had fought too hard, blood too much to let the aliens slip through their fingers. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for the future of humanity. The Resolute wasn't just a ship. It was the last stand of an entire species, and it had earned its place in history. The Resolute continued its relentless assault on the remaining alien forces, taking out ship after ship. The alien fleet, though large, was dwindling in numbers, their fire growing weaker as their confidence shattered. They had not anticipated a fight like this. They had thought humanity would crumble under the pressure, but they were wrong. Humanity had stood firm, and now the alien invaders were paying the price. One by one, the remaining ships were either destroyed or forced to flee, leaving the vastness of space quiet once again. The silence that followed felt like a weight, heavy and still, but it was also a victory. "We've done it," Lieutenant Jung said, his voice filled with awe. "They're gone. We've won." Harlow stood at the front of the bridge, her face a mask of exhaustion, but also relief. The battle had been won, but the cost was clear. The Resolute had suffered heavy damage, and many of her crew were injured. But they had done it. They had pushed back the invaders. "Return course to Earth," Harlow said, her voice steady. "We've earned our rest." As the ship began its long journey back to Earth, the crew allowed themselves a moment to breathe, to process what they had just accomplished. The journey home would be long, and there would be time to mourn their losses, but for now, they could celebrate the fact that humanity had stood tall against a much larger force and had emerged victorious. The war was not over. There would be rebuilding, and there would be challenges ahead. But today, humanity had proven something that would echo through the stars. They were not a species to be underestimated. The Resolute glided through space, its crew tired but victorious, heading home to a world that would forever remember the battle fought here, on the edge of human endurance. They had shown the galaxy the true strength of humanity, and the cost of their victory was a reminder that in this universe, humanity would never go quietly into the night.